Good morning, class 9 students. I welcome you all on this online virtual digital learning platform provided by Jagrati Classes. We have completed with our first 4 chapters, that were the chapters of chemistry in science. Now we'll start biology, that is your chapter 5. Chapter 5 is the fundamental unit of life. So this class is for class 9 students. And we are starting our biology section. We have already completed with all the 4 chapters of chemistry given in your books. So now we are dealing with chapter 5. And chapter 5 is the fundamental unit of life. So we'll be starting this chapter and we'll see what all we have to study in this chapter. The fundamental unit of life. So fundamental means the basic unit of life, that is anything which is of immense importance, without which no life can sustain or no life can pertain. So this fundamental unit of life in biology is called your cell. So we call the cell to be the fundamental unit of life. Now the first question arises with the beginning of the chapter, that why is cell known as the fundamental unit of life? So first question, or it may be called that firstly you can be asked, what do you mean by the fundamental unit of life and what is referred to as the fundamental unit? So the fundamental unit of life means that smallest thing or that smallest unit without which you cannot have any kind of life, without which you cannot imagine life. So this fundamental unit of life is your cell. And now we'll see we have different types of cells. The cells may be according to that plant and animal cell, or you can classify cells according to their shape. Okay, then the shape of the cell is decided by the function it performs. That is, for example, if I take a nerve cell, then nerve cell is elongated. Why so? Why nerve cell is not spherical? Because the function of nerve cell is the conduction of nerve impulses, or it carries the impulses from our brain to the organ and from the organs to our brain and spinal cord, you can say. So because it has the function of conduction of impulses or conduction of signals from brain to spinal cord, from the brain to the organs, or from the organs to your nervous system, so it has a elongated shape. Then we can say that we have blood cells. You all have studied about it, that is RBCs, WBCs. So why do RBC have a spherical shape? Why they are oval and why not they are elongated? They can be elongated also. So I said just now that shape is dependent on the function. So because what is the function of RBC? Can you recall? Can you recall that why RBC are spherical? No, you can't. But you can recall why. What is the function which RBC performs? RBCs, that are red blood cells, they are spherical or oval in shape, you can say. And they have the function, that is they contain a pigment called hemoglobin. Okay? We say that these RBCs are a storehouse of red colored pigment, that is hemoglobin, and because of the presence of hemoglobin we have the color of blood to be red. If hemoglobin would not be present, might we had a transparent blood, okay, or might we have a different colored blood? So because of the presence of hemoglobin in our RBCs, we have the blood to be of red color. Okay, we have understood this. We knew it, ma'am, from earlier classes. Then RBC is spherical because it has the function to store hemoglobin. RBC act as a storehouse or a reservoir of hemoglobin. So because it has to store hemoglobin, if it would acquire a cylindrical shape or an elongated shape, then the quantity of hemoglobin which it can store will definitely reduce. So for this reason, RBCs have a spherical shape. Now we have discussed that what do you mean by cell? That is, cell is the basic unit. Cell is also called the structural and functional unit. Either you can call it a fundamental, that is the most important unit, or it is also referred as structural and functional unit. Now you know that structural and functional unit signifies that cell is the basic unit for the development of any structure, that if you see the development of any living organism, the complete organism, if you come and break it off, then you will find that the smallest unit which can't be broken down is your cell. Like we study in chemistry, if you have any compound, let's suppose if you have water there, and if you try to break this into the respective atoms, because you know in chemistry we have the smallest unit to be atom. So if I try to break this, then I'll get what? I'll get one oxygen atom combined with two hydrogen atoms, and it forms a compound. So the smallest unit which we got here in chemistry was atom. But talking about the biology, that is living beings, the structural unit of life is called cell. Because if you take any organism, consider any living organism, okay, this organism definitely has certain organ system which is combined together. So if I break down or go down in the hierarchy from organism to its basic functional part, then I see that organism is made up of group of organ system, okay. Organism comprises a group of organ system. Then this organ system would be made up of what? Consider any organ system, that is we say digestive system, taking an example. Then that digestive system is made up of different digestive organs, that is you have your stomach, intestines, etc. So organ system is therefore made up of a collection of organs. Then going further down, these organs are made from what? If you consider an organ that is stomach, then stomach is made up of what? It is made up of different tissues. So we say organs are made up of different tissue. And breaking these tissues also further down, what you get is, you get the structural unit, that is cell. So we can say that if you combine, what are tissues? Tissues are the group of cells which function, which combine together and they perform a single particular function. So this is what you have, a cell. If you join cell, that is if you take a group of cells, then it would be called as tissue. Group of tissue makes up a organ. Group of organ gives you organ system, and if you comprise many organ systems systematically, then you would find an organism, or you will get the organism. So this is why we call cell as the structural unit of life, because each and every structure which we see around us, that is all the living structures or the life forms which you see, are made up of a single unit of cell. And in turn, these cells combine together to form the complete organism. Now then, why this is called the functional unit? If you got that cell is called the structural unit, because if you move down the hierarchy, you will get the smallest unit to be the cell, and now you cannot break this cell into any other part. So it is the structural smallest unit which comprises the structure of organism. Talking about the next term, functional unit. So why is this cell called the functional unit? Because this cell is responsible for carrying out all sorts of different functions in the organism. So this cell is also referred to as functional unit, because these cells, they have the capacity to perform different functions, and these contain different organelles in them for performing different functions. Now, certainly students mix the two terms, that is organs and organelles. Organs we discussed just now. Organs are present in the organism. Organs are the group of tissues. We say that each cell contains some or other organelles in them. That is, this cell contains many organelles in it. For example, you will have a nucleus in each cell. Then you will have cell membrane. Then you will have other organelles. Let's suppose you will have your ER, that is endoplasmic reticulum. Then you have Golgi complexes in the cell. So these organelles which are present within the cell, these are present inside the cell. So these are referred as cell organelles. While when the cell combines to form tissues and tissue combine to form organs, so these organs are group of tissue. So you can write here that organs are a group of tissue which perform a similar function, whereas organelles, cell organelles are present within the cell, that is inside the cell. So this is what, do not confuse both the terms or interchange both the terms. That is, these are not organs, these are cell organelles, and the organs are therefore group of tissues performing a particular similar function. Now next we'll study about different organelles, okay? With it, I have already discussed that cells can be of different kinds. That is, a cell, on the basis where it is present, it can be present in animal and therefore referred to as animal cells, and the cells present in plant is therefore called plant cell. After studying all the organelles, we'll see a descriptive or differentiating account between both the animal cells and plant cells. That is, what are the differences in animal and plant cell? For example, if I talk about plasma membrane or cell membrane is a part of or organelle of the cell. So the cell membrane is present in both. While talking about the next organelle, that is cell wall. So cell wall will be present in the plant cell, but it is absent in animal cells. Then we'll talk about more organelles. For example, vacuoles. Vacuoles are the empty spaces present in the cell surrounded by a membrane. I'm just giving you an idea. We'll discuss all this in detail, okay, in this chapter. So if I talk about vacuoles here, you will see that animal cells have very small sized vacuoles. While if you talk for the plant cell, 90% of the plant cell contains vacuole. That is, 90% of the volume of plant cell is empty. So this would be the differentiating features of plant and animal cells. Then you can say, according to the number of cells present in any organism. Now the basis of our classification is number of cell present in organism. You can classify the organism into two parts or two kinds. That is your unicellular organism, and then comes the multicellular organism. And I know you have done this all in your previous classes, but we are starting with the introduction of the chapter. So unicellular and multicellular, as the name suggests, unicellular means, uni means one, single, and cellular means made up of cell. So organisms which are, these are also called as single-celled organisms. Those organisms which are made up of only a single cell are called unicellular organisms, while those organisms which are made up of many cells, okay, the organisms which are made up of many cells, that is, if they have more than one cell, they are called multicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms are quite the primitive ones or the simpler ones, okay, they have the simple body design and simple structural features. Then in unicellular organisms, you can write they are the primitive or simple organisms. Then this single cell which is present in unicellular organisms is responsible to carry out all their life processes. That is, this single cells perform the functions of digestion, respiration, then comes excretion, everything is the duty of this single cell. So we can write this single cell is responsible, or this single cell carries out all life processes of this organism. Life processes, as I already discussed, life processes means all the functions which are important to live. That is, the function of respiration, excretion, digestion, etc. So this single cell is responsible to carry out all the life process or all the life functions. Whereas in multicellular organism, we have division of labor. That is, we divide the duties to each group of cells. Because we have many cells, that is, we have many tissues in them. So their division of labor is seen. While here this single cell had all the responsibility, in multicellular organisms, we see division of labor. I hope you understand the term division of labor. Labor means the complete work or complete life processes, okay? And division means we are giving separate responsibility to each cell or each group of cells, that some cells will perform the function of digestion. It is that they have to only do the processes involved in digestion, nothing else. Then the other cells would be given or assigned a duty to do excretion. In turn, we see a division of labor. That is, these many cells perform different functions. If one group performs the function of digestion, the other might perform excretory functions, and remaining would be the respiration, or you can have reproduction. All life functions are carried by different cells as compared to unicellular, in which only single cell was involved. Giving you an example of unicellular, the most common example which comes is amoeba. You all know amoeba does not have any fixed shape. Okay? Anyone can draw an amoeba. So let's suppose this is amoeba. It contains a single cell. That is, it is a unicellular organism. And this single cell is responsible for each and every function. Whereas talking about multicellular organism, you can say cow, dogs, or the most common example is humans. So we humans are the multicellular organism, that is, we have many cells, and all these cells show division of labor. That is, every cell has its specific function or specific duty to perform. So this is what the differentiation of the cell. Now what we have next is, now we'll study one by one the different organelles, cell organelles which are included in your cells. The different organelles, isse pehle we have to study the history also. So talking about the historical approach or history, how these cells were discovered. Now firstly, Robert Hooke observed cells. Okay? So in the history, first point comes that Robert Hooke, he discovered cells in what? In a Koch's lice. When he observed a Koch's lice under a primitive microscope. I am just giving you the important terms which you have to remember, and you can form the complete statement using it. Robert Hooke firstly observed cells after observing the Koch's lice, a piece of Koch's lice in his primitive microscope. That is, the microscope was not well developed. So Robert Hooke firstly discovered what do you mean by cells. Then you have next, that is Leeuwenhoek. Leeuwenhoek saw cells present in pond water. So he observed a sample of pond water and so saw the cells present in it. Then next, in 1831, Robert Brown discovered nucleus. Okay? This all is given in your books. So in 1831, Robert Brown discovered the nucleus of the cell. Then next you have is what? The next scientist, that is Purkinje. He discovered a term protoplasm. And this term protoplasm means the combination of your nucleus and cytoplasm. That is, protoplasm is the living content or living material of the cell. Okay, that is including your cytoplasm and nucleus. You can use the term protoplasm. So this is what the history of cell, that is firstly Robert Hooke discovered cell and he used a primitive microscope here. Then some advanced microscope, Leeuwenhoek observed the pond water sample and he used advanced microscope. Then later what we have is, we have in 1831 Robert Brown discovered the nucleus, and this Purkinje who discovered protoplasm, he used an electron microscope. An electron microscope is a very advanced microscope and he studied about protoplasm, that is the living content of the cell. Then what we have as an important topic next is cell theory. So what do you mean by cell theory? Cell theory was given by a botanist and a zoologist, that is Schleiden and Schwann. Schleiden and Schwann in 1838 and 1839, they proposed cell theory, and this cell theory was an important milestone in the discoveries of these cells. That is, after proposing this cell theory, we had many advancement in this cellular structures. So it was given by the botanist and zoologist Schleiden and Schwann in 1838 and 1839. What are the postulates of the cell theory proposed by them? So the first postulate of cell theory is all organisms, we have that all organisms, every living organism are made up of cells. Okay, that is, they suggested to cell to be the structural unit of life. The next what we have is all organisms are made up of cells. That is, cells are the structural and functional unit of life. And this cell theory was also expanded by the scientist named Virchow in 1855, I guess, that he said all these, the both first and second postulates were pretty correct, that all organisms are made up of cells and cells are the structural unit of life. But the third important postulate which was added by him, he suggested that, okay, we have the cells, but how these cells will grow further? So he suggested all the cells arise from pre-existing cells. So this was again an important milestone in this development of cell theory. What he suggested was that if you have a single cell, and if this cell undergoes certain division, then you will get many smaller cells from this parent cell. So this was an important conclusion, that because the parent cell undergoes certain division and we get new cells, so the life would continue and the cells would be again and again reformed from the pre-existing cells. So he gave us the concept of generation of cells, that is how new cells are being made. So this was again of immense importance. So this is what you mean by cell theory. Cell theory is given by a German botanist and zoologist Schleiden and Schwann in the year 1838 and 1839. Then the postulates of cell theory is, the first one is all organisms are made up of cells. The next you have is cells are the structural and functional unit of life. With next you have that Virchow in 1855 told that all these cells which are present, they are made up of the pre-existing cells. That is, he gave the hypothesis of generation of cells. So this is all about cell theory. Now next we'll deal one by one with the different cell organelles as per the order given in your books. So the first cell organelles which we have is plasma membrane. So we are starting with the first cell organelle, that is plasma membrane. The first point in plasma membrane is that it is also called as cell membrane. So this plasma membrane is also called as cell membrane. Then we'll study the composition. That is, what is plasma membrane actually made up of? So this plasma membrane, it is made up of proteins and lipids. That is, plasma membrane contains proteins and lipids in their structural composition. Because of the presence of proteins and lipids, plasma membrane is usually flexible. So the next point which we can include is plasma membrane is comparatively flexible. That is, it has the ability to get bent. Okay, it can fold or it can get bent. So plasma membrane is flexible, because the reason for this is because it is made up of proteins and lipids are usually the loosely bounded component which give it a flexible kind of capability or nature. The next, the most important point where the question occurs, that this membrane is called selectively permeable membrane. We can write this plasma membrane, it is also known as selectively permeable membrane. Now you should know, what do you mean by the term selectively permeable? Selectively permeable membrane, or in short I can write it as SPM. SPM abbreviation stands for selectively permeable membrane. It is called selectively permeable because this plasma membrane contains certain holes in it or small pores through which some substances can pass inside the cell or outside the cell. But only selective substances can pass in and out, and it also restricts or stops some other substances to pass in and out. That is, it is known as selectively permeable membrane because it allows only some specific substance, that is only some particular substance to move through it, and it does not allow other substance to pass through it. Because it allows specific substances to move in and out of the cell, through plasma membrane, or I can write through it, but stops or restricts, okay? Stops means here restricts, and it restricts other substances or other materials to move in and out. And in turn, this plasma membrane is called the selectively permeable membrane because it only allows entry of, let's suppose this is our plasma membrane which contains several holes or pores in it. Then if I have substances called A, B, C and D, then might it allow A, this is the plasma membrane which is present as the outer covering of the cell. So plasma membrane, this is the outermost covering of cell, outermost covering. So this plasma membrane will allow A to pass through it, B to pass through it, and let's suppose we have a substance E here, so it may allow E to go through it outside the cell. This is your cell, so this is the inside portion, but it will not allow some substance, for example, it will not allow C and D to move in, or it will not allow the substance F to pass out through it. That is why it is called as selectively permeable, because it only allows certain specific substances to move in and out, and then it restricts or stops the movement of the other substances. So in turn, this plasma membrane, or you can say the cell membrane, is called selectively permeable. The next is what? Plasma membrane is the outermost covering. You can write it as the outermost covering in animal cells. But if we talk about our plant cell, then plasma membrane is covered by one more membrane which is called cell wall in plants. So plasma membrane will not function as the outermost covering in plants, while this plasma membrane will definitely function as the outermost covering in animals. What I mean to say is, if you draw an animal cell, let's suppose you have an animal cell here, then the outermost covering will be obviously your plasma membrane, if you are talking about animal cell. But if you are talking about your plant cell, then this plasma membrane will not be your outermost covering. In plant cell, this would be covered by an additional covering. That is, the innermost will be your plasma membrane, but the outermost covering would be your cell wall. So when we'll study plant cell, we'll see what do you mean by cell wall, what are the functions of cell wall. But till now, you should know that plasma membrane, it's the outermost covering, definitely in your animal cells. But while talking about your plant cell, you have one more additional covering referred to as cell wall, which is present outside the plasma membrane. So this was an account of plasma membrane. Now, we said that plasma membrane is selectively permeable, that it will allow certain substances to move through it. So the movement of these substances, that is, movement of substances through the plasma membrane, through your plasma membrane, can occur by two phenomena, okay? Then two processes are responsible for bringing about this movement through the plasma membrane. The first one is diffusion. We can write movement of substances through the plasma membrane can occur in two ways or by two processes. The first process here is your diffusion, and the next one is osmosis. So the term diffusion, these are much similar process. We'll see the differentiating points between diffusion and osmosis. So the first point in diffusion and osmosis is that diffusion is generally used, the term diffusion is used for solid substances and your gases. But the term osmosis is used for the liquids which are passing or which are moving through the plasma membrane. So diffusion term we use for solids and gases, while osmosis term is abbreviated for liquids. The next point what you have here is the process of diffusion can be defined that it is the movement of substances, it is the movement of substances from high concentration to its low concentration. This is what you mean by diffusion. That is, it is the movement from high concentration of the substance to its low concentration. Let's suppose we have a cell here. Okay, these substances refer here to what? The substances means solids and your gases. So if I am talking about the movement of solids and gases, then I observe that if you have your cell here and your plasma membrane, this is the plasma membrane of the cell, then the substances, that is the solids and the gases, will move through the plasma membrane as a matter of diffusion or by the process of diffusion. Let's suppose you have some molecules of solid A here and less number of molecules inside. Then the higher concentration of this solid movement will be from high concentration to low concentration. Higher concentration of solid is where? Outside the cell, and we have lower concentration inside. So the movement will be from outside to the inside of the cell. But if we had a reverse situation, let's suppose we have some gas molecules inside the cell and less number of molecules outside, then now the direction of movement would be what? The movement would be from higher concentration of that gas, of that substance. So higher amount of gas is present inside, then it will move from inside to outside. So the direction of movement would be inside of the cell towards the outside. Talking about the liquids. In liquids, what do we have? It is the movement of substances. Substances or materials here refer to the liquid substances. So osmosis is the movement of substances from higher concentration to low concentration, but here one term is included, that is through semi-permeable membrane. Okay, here we do not need any kind of semi-permeable membrane. It is just the movement of solid and gases from higher to lower concentration. But in osmosis, we need a semi-permeable membrane. That is, whenever any liquid molecule moves through a semi-permeable membrane from its higher to lower concentration, then you call the process to be osmosis. So, let's suppose now we'll discuss in the next class, that is what are the three types of movement whenever you have different concentration of solution, that is isotonic, hypotonic and hypertonic. That topic we'll continue in our next class. But talking about giving you an example, let's suppose you have your here we do not need to take the semi-permeable membrane, okay? But here let's suppose you have your semi-permeable membrane, that is your plasma membrane, or it can any semi-permeable membrane you have. Then the movement of substances, let's suppose you have water molecules in this number outside the cell and number of water molecules inside is very low. Why I am taking only water? Because osmosis refer to movement of liquids. So the movement of these water molecules will be from where? It will move towards inside or outside. I said movement is from higher concentration of substance. The substance here is water. So higher concentration of water is which side? Outside. So it moves from high to low. Then this water molecule will move from higher concentration to its lower concentration, that is from outside to inside of the cell. And therefore, because this movement is involving your semi-permeable membrane, the movement is through the SPM or semi-permeable membrane, therefore it is referred to as osmosis. So this is the basic difference which we have in diffusion and osmosis. We say that movement of any substances, we can classify the movement into two categories. Okay. So movement of any substances can be classified into two categories, that is it may either occur by the process of diffusion or it may occur by the process of osmosis. For diffusion you have the movement of solids and gases, but here we study the movement of liquids. Then diffusion means the movement of substance from higher to lower concentration. The substance you are taking here is solids and gases. So in diffusion, these substances will move from their higher to lower concentration. But diffusion process does not require any kind of semi-permeable membrane. Diffusion can occur through the normal membrane. So we took an example that if I have 10-20 molecules of any solid outside the cell and less number inside, then if you have more quantity, then you say the concentration of solid is more outside compared to inside. So these solids will move towards the cell or inside the cell. While if I reciprocate these concentration, that is if I take much concentration or high concentration inside and less concentration to be present at the outside, then the movement would be reversed, that is these solid particles will move outside the cell. The next is what we have studied, osmosis here. Osmosis, we generally govern the process by using liquids, and in this we have the movement of substances as the same way which we studied in diffusion. That is movement is from higher concentration to low. We can write everywhere the movement occurs from high to low concentration. But here referring to the concentration of what? The substance which you are studying. And for osmosis you study about liquids. So this is the movement of where the liquid molecules are present in high to the side where the liquids are present in lower concentration. So we say the movement of water will occur from A side to B side, or you can say from outside to inside. So this I think is enough for today's class. Now tomorrow we will be studying about hypertonic, isotonic and hypertonic solutions which are included in your osmosis terms. Okay, so thank you for joining the class, and if you have any sort of doubts you can contact us anytime. Thank you.